первой секции, и я думаю, что этот секции технология вместо людей, это не менее интересно. И именно на этой теме был маленький конкурс, и были разные вопросы. Один из них это был с Кристоф Масур. И интересный вопрос был о чем, когда впервые обсуждали вопрос о беспилотной машине. Да? When did you first discuss the pilotless car? And what were the options?
The options were something in the 15th. So the options were something in the 15th century, which would have been something around Da Vinci. Then there had been some options of when there was the first vehicle propelled by some power, which I think was something in the 17th century. The first car developed, patented in Germany, which was, I think, the 19th century, and then few actually real trials with autonomous cars in the 20th century. And yeah, shall I give the answer?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it was also quite funny to find out for me that the first time that a person actually came up with an idea. Sorry. Hello, welcome everyone. So the first car, it was also quite surprising for me, was actually designed or put on paper by Da Vinci, the first car which was self-driving, which I will talk later about it, which was a car with some strings together, which you kind of programmed in a way that you set up a route based upon how you put together the strings and the gears, and then it followed this pre-given route. So answer A, that's the right answer.
И, конечно, это очень интересно, что именно этот конкурс появился вот летом мероприятии. Было у нас победитель, она, я думаю, занят в каком-то месте, но если ее нет пока, нет, окей, но это... А, есть? О! Значит, у нас есть победитель, да? Первый, да. Пожалуйста. И, конечно, если мы говорим о беспилотной машине, тогда у нас будет для вас вот именно вот предмет, который помогает вас. Вот, спокойно ездит на машине и одновременно, я надеюсь, безопасно, и технология, может быть, поможет вам в этой. Так что, если вы... Микрофончик.
Да.
Чтобы был готов к всем этим, мы очень благодарны, что будет вам комфортно и с этим предметом, пожалуйста, поздравляю вас. Да. И технология – это, конечно, очень важный сюжет между ЕС и Россией обсуждать. И я очень рад, что у нас были спикеры из стран ЕС, и не менее важно для этой секции Кристоф Масур. Спасибо большое.
Спасибо. Ну, как вы поняли, уже были небольшие спойлеры. Сейчас мы будем говорить про беспилотные автомобили. Наверное, такой один из самых главных трендов последнего времени. Беспилотные автомобили уже реальность, о чем мы сейчас узнаем. Собственно, возникает множество вопросов. Можно ли доверить свою жизнь беспилотному автомобилю? Как программировать искусственный интеллект? Кто ответственен, если эти автомобили попадают в аварию? И много чего другого. И об этом нам расскажет Кристоф Мазур, научный сотрудник Имперского колледжа Лондона, который при этом еще работает в Лондонской школе экономики. Поприветствуем Кристофа и передаю ему слово. Кристоф, прошу.
Okay, thanks a lot for inviting me for this open day, which is very, very interesting. I looked for the program, and you have some very impressive speakers here who are discussing cutting-edge technology and looking into the future and discussing that. And yeah, I'm quite honored to be invited and part of this event. So, coming to my own part, so I got asked to talk about, is the society ready for self-driving cars? Because it's a topic which is currently being very much discussed, very much hyped in industry, in policy, in media. And I will give you my own opinion, but also the evidence on the technology in this field and the implications for our life. In order to understand where I'm coming from and kind of which point of view I'm giving you, I'll briefly introduce myself so you have a bit of an idea. Yeah, that's me. So I'm an urban systems researcher at Imperial College London. Urban systems means I look at cities, and especially I'm looking how to make them more sustainable, how to make them they work better, that they are, let's say, greener, more efficient, and that people are much more happy. This means I look at anything from health, transport, energy, air quality, and. How did I get there? I talk very briefly from my own path. So I started as an automotive engineer in Germany, worked for Mercedes on one hand, but also studied economics, because I realized if I want to change technology, if I want to bring out new products, I need kind of just engineering is not enough. So I looked into economics as well. Went then to Paris to do some design and found out, hey, you can design stuff in a way that it can be designed for sustainable development, for kind of clean technologies. Because before that, I was thinking, I'm gonna work for Mercedes, for BMW, build very fast driving cars, racing cars, and have fun. I realized, no, that's not how it works, especially because of problems of climate change, CO2, and so on. There needs to be another way. So came back to Germany and hired for Mercedes and was in a division which was actually building hybrid vehicles. And there was in a design team and a manufacturing team, and tried also to use this from within to change the company. And I realized, okay, I'm just one of many, many people. I can't change the company for myself. It's not happening fast enough. So I thought, okay, I need to go into something else. So if it doesn't work from inside, although the economics works and so on, let's go into the policy side and for innovation. So I went to England, did a PhD in a group which looked into kind of policy and innovation, how to kind of foster and how to support innovation in the area of mobility, kind of how to get more electric cars on the roads, or in a blunt way to say, how to force the industry actually to deliver those cars. So that's what my PhD focused on. Worked and during the time and afterwards for the UK Parliament on energy-related things, advising members of Parliament how to roll out smart metering, smart technologies, how to make heat, electricity more efficient, and so on. Finished my research and realized, actually, I know that I can support the uptake of cars and so on to make transport cleaner, but with the uptake of car sharing schemes, of autonomous cars, of electric bus fleets and so on, and the change how people perceive transport, I realized it's not just only about the cars. It's about the whole city, the place we are living in, the urban environment. So I realized, okay, I have to look at it as a bigger picture, and that's how I ended up in the end in urban development and urban systems. So now I'm looking, yes, at transport still, but also at water, at energy, at air quality, human behavior, happiness of people. Because if you want any technology, if you want to introduce something new in the systems we are living in, even though the technology works, even though the economics is there, very often those technologies are not happening. And that's where we are currently looking at. How can we change human behavior, or how can we understand societies that we can bring those technologies in? And I will talk in a moment more about that. But that's in a nutshell about myself. So as I say, I come from there. I thought, imagine an amazing fast car attached to that. I'm not telling which brand, BMW. And I'm ending up here. So currently I'm looking at different city districts. It's a program called Smart Sustainable Districts. So it's the Olympic Park in London, a district next to Paris, and something in Utrecht, and currently in Berlin. So those are city districts where people are trying to redevelop them or to change them. Some of them, like for example after Olympic Games, they want to turn it into something where more and more people live, with more museums, so there's lots of money, lots of activity. In Paris, it's a former dock quarter, industrial quarter. In Berlin, it's a mix between where lots of people are living and lots of industrial sites. In Utrecht, it's a quite cultural quarter. And they want to do something there, and they're already doing lots of things there. So what we do with our massive network of experts, we come in, so I have a picture of the experts. So bunch of universities, It's kind of funded by Climate Geeks, the European Union. Lots of universities, experts on water, on transport, on energy, and so on, come in. First of all, bring together all the people who are already doing amazing stuff in the cities, talk to them, nudge them a little bit. Hey, it's amazing what you're doing, but actually, don't you want to try those technologies which we have in our drawers and so on? Or you could be a bit more ambitious. And especially you are already spending lots of money in doing stuff, so why not, if you're already spending it, install something which will be still very innovative and sustainable even in 10, 20 years, instead of taking the stuff which everyone knows. So that's also why we are competing with some bigger consulting companies or some bigger building companies. And what we have then realized is very often in those districts, so this is before, the other side is after, there are lots of activities in water, in waste, in transport. They are trying to become very sustainable, but very often for themselves. So what we have realized, okay, first of all, we bring all those people together through, I would call it magic, or let's say some processes which we have developed, to align all those activities, to actually create things by bringing them together that suddenly work, which haven't worked by themselves. For example, in certain districts, you could install lots of solar panels on the roofs, but then suddenly you mess up the local grids. So we then realized, okay, on the other hand, now the city authorities, they would like to bring in electric cars or autonomous cars in, which can be used as storage. And then on the other hand, some new smart metering technologies, but they can't afford it. But suddenly, when we bring all those people together who have some budgets, plus some novel technologies which we have with us in our network, we create cluster of solutions, which then suddenly together are affordable, work, create synergies, and. And that's kind of where the transport side comes into play, especially autonomous cars and self-driving cars. So I will jump between autonomous and self-driving cars very often, and it's the same thing. So we've realized that autonomous cars, which we are also developing with some colleagues from Oxford, we are doing more batteries and so on, and looking how they fit together. We have realized autonomous cars will have a massive impact on this whole nexus, on those clusters. And kind of, we've realized it won't be just about the way we perceive mobility, but actually how we live in cities and so on. So, first self-driving car, we have already answered. So kind of just to confirm, yes, this was a first self-driving car. Plans by Da Vinci, which he had drawn, so he had an idea, okay, if I wanted to have something which is self-driving, because I don't have all these people there. You know, Da Vinci, one of the last generalists, can do everything. So he drew something with different gears, with different ropes, and it has been even built, which was able, kind of, you put some strings together, you pulled them, you set certain settings, and then a little bit like a watch. And based upon what you put in, it went through this particular route. So that was the first self-driving car. I wouldn't say autonomous car, because it was still programmed to go a certain route, but it was driving by itself. So how does the car look today? So you probably think of certain cars by Google, by Tesla, and so on. And I show you this picture. So that's a self-driving car today. And I'll use this picture to explain you why are we now talking about self-driving cars and not, let's say, 10 years ago? Or, yeah, so why we are already here? So, self-driving cars, what are they replicating? They're replicating us, the human being. And how do we normally drive a car? We look, first of all, what's kind of happening around us. We listen, we look, we sense, and so on. So it's the sense part. Then, once we have, kind of constantly, once we've analyzed what's happening around us, we then decide, or analyze the data and decide what are we doing. Okay, I will accelerate, I will stop, I will turn right or left, which is the understanding side. And then obviously we act, which is, yeah, we push down, kind of use our leg, push down accelerator, turn left or right. So it's kind of our thing. So in the last years, all those different components, they have been actually made technologically viable. They've reached the size which we actually need to put into a car, and the costs. So GPS, when you think 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when you went anywhere walking, hiking and so on, you had a paper map. Now you have in your phones, a whole device which tells you where to go. Cameras, same thing in your phones. When you think how kind of does this quality of photos, what you needed 10 years ago, or even how digital cameras, what the performance they had 10 years ago, they were rubbish. So there's been lots of improvement. Radar always existed. That's one of the main components. 3D scanning and LiDAR, it's like radar but with light. So it's optical to create different vision maps around you. And ultrasound, it can actually pass through certain things. So it's different senses which we are copying from our body, which in the last years have been made more performant, just made more performant in the last years, and which allow us to capture actually what's happening around us. So it's one step, so which happened in recent years, as you mainly see in your phones. Then you see all the data which you're collecting, we could have collected already ages ago. But it was so much, first of all, storage was quite expensive, and you need communication and computing power. So it's again, just in the last years, that your phones became 100 times faster than a computer, let's say 15 years ago. And so suddenly the technology fits into the car. Okay, those are still big boxes because you have still a lot of technology in those cars. So this was another change and step which allowed that development. That's why we are talking about it now. Dealing with big data, for example, also just enabled now. So once we have all the data, we come to the understanding, which is the thinking. So you probably hear now that people are starting to replicate the human brain with Bayesian networks, with decision networks, and so on. And those are technologies which are kind of also just recent. So the approaches, how the brain looks like, how they could be built, they have been known for ages. But it's just now that we have the computing power and technology to make it happen, kind of to take all the different data and actually do something with it, to fuse the data. And then different things like vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure communication, like GPS, like traffic guiding systems. So it's just now that in the developed world we're starting to have those technologies and that we can bring everything together. So that's also a reason why it's happening now. And and this had been all before, so kind of automated, accelerate car and so on. So you know, we had Mars rovers, vehicles on the Mars before, which were and so on. So that's the old stuff. But because of the last years, each of those different components have been made more performant, cheaper, smaller. We can now start talking about autonomous cars. So that's an autonomous car. Then furthermore, what does actually mean autonomous cars when you're talking about? Because there are different definitions. And how much autonomy do we have already? How much self-driving cars do we have already? So the first one, level 0 and level 1, that's the stuff which we had for ages. Okay, level 0 means no automation. We are having fully control. But in cars, for example, you have systems which help you not to slip from this road. Or when you're braking, they help you to brake. This is already a first level of automation because we say it helps the driver and we are used to it, we have accepted it, we trust it, but actually it interferes a little bit in the way we drive. Because actually what ABS is doing is when you're completely braking, it is taking automatically the foot off the brake to brake better, which would be counterintuitive, but we're still accepting that. So those levels we had for ages. Then level 2 is just about to appear, so it's like cruise control, that you can set the car a certain speed or that it keeps the road, so kind of stuff which we program in on purpose and then it keeps it. So that's stuff which we have as well. The exciting stuff is actually those two ones. So level 3, which is already a massive step towards automation, already exists. So you have bigger companies like Tesla, okay, this is not a big company, but like Tesla, Mercedes, Audi and so on, who have systems which can keep the track when you're driving on the highway, which are overtaking other cars, which are kind of taking some decisions and some off the driver. You still have to drive it and you still have to be there to interfere and to decide, but you have that already, that are parking in for you and so on. And those are technologies kind of, why they kind of decided with those? Because they were simple to implement, but they were also easy, or kind of people saw straight away the advantage of having them. But when we are talking about self-driving, we actually talk about this bit here, that you could have a car where literally the driver is sleeping, or that you don't even have any driver in it. And now, finally, technology has reached a state where we can make this here happen. And yeah, in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, we should see many, many more of those cars happen. But there are some barriers, to which I'll come in a moment. So yeah, so that's the self-driving car. Why it will take a little bit of time is, one of the main reasons is human beings and our perception, and especially the discussion about ethics. So one of the first questions which I hear about autonomous cars, yes, Chris, but don't have autonomous cars actually to decide about life and death? And who is then fault of it? Is it the programmer? Is it the company? And so on. That's a picture from an article of the technology review of the MIT. Just kind of to have a thought about it. Because if you have an autonomous car, for example, with lots of people, in case A, with lots of people inside, and you have a crowd of people, which let's say they shouldn't, it's a red light, they shouldn't be crossing it, but they cross it now, which is, let's say, a breach of the law. And the only smart person, or kind of following the law, isn't crossing. Then the car, how should it decide? Should it just go straight and just say, okay, they didn't follow the law, they went over the red light? Or just say, okay, it's just one person, bad luck, he should have gone with the crowd? So there you see there are certain issues in terms of how to define it, because the cars will be able to do that. They are safer than human beings. They can spot things in a better way. They can react faster. So this will be stuff which committees, ethics committees, will have to decide how to program. So it's one example. The other one is, because in this case, still, the people inside of the car are safe. In this case, imagine you have walls to both sides and someone walks there. Then how shall the car decide? Shall it say, okay, I'm protecting the passengers always, I go completely through? Or I'd say, okay, there's one person, I have perhaps one person there, or it's perhaps empty, then it probably would say, okay, I'm empty, I'm not hurting anyone, I just run against the wall. Or if there are 4 people, so you say, okay. So it is a little bit of, so I think in the picture, which they showed us the picture of like a godlike figure sitting on the car, which is kind of deciding a little bit for you. And then the same scenario if you have many people there. So how do you value life and death? Or also the cars will be even able to see, is someone young or very old? How many years will this person have to? So there will be, you see, it's a quite delicate problem. I don't even want to go into that discussion too much. But those will be issues which will have to be dealt with. Unfortunately, those are the issues which people are very, very loud about, which are criticizing the thing. Because on the other hand, the technology allows lots of advantages, which need to be communicated in the right way. And I come to some of them. So why are we actually talking about autonomous car? Or why is there such a push by the industry and by governments to still push it, although there is so much conflict about, let's say, ethics. And lots of people say, actually, I would like to drive a car. I love driving a car. It's so much fun. I want to have the control. I don't trust them. Why is there still a discussion? For that, you need to understand how the world of a normal car works. So there's a colleague from Stanford, Stefan Heck, whom I worked on a study for United Nations, where we looked into how could we, in general, decarbonize transport. So make transport cleaner, more efficient, and so on. And for that, first you have to understand how road transport, individual road transport looks. Obviously, it's an American example because he's in Stanford, so I just use that. But it applies to anywhere in the world. So when you buy a car, or anyone buys a car, you spend lots of money, probably second amount of money, second biggest lump sum after your house. And then how much do you actually use it? Barely any time, so like 95% of the time the car is just standing around. It's a nice status symbol, yeah, and even if you're using it, most of the time you stand in traffic jams, as I did yesterday. So yeah, you buy something which is just standing around. So one inefficiency. The other one is the nature of combustion engines. Of every drop of fuel which you put in, the amount of energy which is actually used to move the car after taking everything from well, which means from taking it out of the ground, to actually moving from A to B. This little bit is actually used for moving of the car. And I'm not even taking into account the energy which had been used to produce the car. So you see, it's a system which is very inefficient. That's kind of the energy side, and cost side. The other side is, we are quite crap in driving cars. We do accidents. We sometimes fall asleep. We're probably sometimes too stupid to drive a car. So when you take the damages which are created in terms of safety and health in the US, you talk here about 300 billion, which is a lot. So that's the reason why countries are quite interested, insurers and so on, and health systems, to take away the driving from the human beings. So here's a little bit of an understanding of the transport system. In order to understand now what has it to do with autonomous cars, you have to look at this picture here, which brings together autonomous cars, shared, electrified and connected. And I just go through the whole thing. So, currently we own a car, which is most of the time standing around. So imagine a future where you move from the car which we owned to something which is shared, which means, yeah, it's owned, for example, by a company or by a public sector, and it's used by several people. Which would then mean the car is not standing around anymore half of the day, which would mean the asset is used in a more extensive way, which would mean you need much less parking spaces and so on. Plus, you're not throwing away lots of money for an artifact which is standing around. Unfortunately, in the US, particular, people are lazy. And they don't like to go to like zip cars and so on, and everyone in the world as well, sorry for that. They don't like to go to a car and to rent it for the use. So what they've realized, okay, it would be actually quite much more convenient, and I come later to the specific groups, that the car comes to you, which would mean turn it away from something which is controlled to something which is autonomous. Because if a car is autonomous, then the car sharing system becomes much more sexy. Because imagine you don't even have to program in, the phone knows when you need to go to work, you step out of the house and the car is already waiting there with you, probably some people inside as well, brings you to a train station and so on. So there's kind of something which is supporting the shared vehicle side. Now, if you have shared vehicles which are driven much more extensively, have many more kilometers per day, per year and so on, suddenly the story with electric cars makes sense. Because right now, electric cars with batteries are quite expensive, unless you use it as a taxi. So in cities like London, you have many hybrid cars, because the more you drive, the cheaper it is in comparison to the purchase cost of the car. So if you have cars which are shared, which are perfectly used by autonomous technology and kind of know where they are and so on, then suddenly you have a case study for electric cars as well, which then means you have less pollution in the cities, less noise, and. And the last bit is the connected side. To have a proper autonomous fleet, you need connection, so communication like GPS, or kind of knowing where the cars are between each other. With that, you can make the transport flow much more efficient. You can make cars drive much nearer to each other without hitting each other and so on. Plus, you can, because electric cars have a limited range, you can perfectly plan when are you going to a certain spot and change the battery between the trips. You have complete control about when, already before you started your first trip, you know when you need to recharge the car, because you know who will be driving with that. So that's kind of the nexus. So why policymakers, kind of to make it more sustainable, clean cities, less pollution, are interested in that, authorities, but also companies, because they see they can make it, if it's a shared car, an autonomous one, they don't have to pay the drivers anymore. They can make transport much cheaper. They can make money. So that's where there's a massive push from industry and from policymakers. Plus, there are other benefits, which I'll just briefly go through. So crash elimination. As I say, we are quite rubbish in driving cars. If they're autonomous, you'll get rid of many accidents, especially if you go 100% autonomous. You probably don't even need traffic lights anymore, because the cars will perfectly cross each other at crossings. It will be quite interesting to see that, with really, really fast crossing next to each other, but yeah, we might have to start trusting that. Reduced need for new infrastructure. We are already struggling with our streets, which are built for peak times, and still always congested. And then, when there's no rush hour, are completely empty in many places. So suddenly, if you have shared vehicles, if you have autonomous cars, because they drive next to each other, near to each other, you need less space, but also because there will be less cars. So suddenly, for example, here in St. Petersburg, you have many, many streets, massive streets. You can probably make them smaller, have more green area here, more green space. There will be data challenges, because you are collecting a lot of data about people who are using the things to plan, where the cars are, how the system works, what's the state of the car, and. So it kind of creates a challenge, but also an opportunity for new models, for new jobs. So yes, many drivers will lose their jobs. So that's kind of obvious. That's the reason why Uber is so interested in getting autonomous cars. They don't want to have drivers. So that's also why you can't call them a real sharing economy company. Because the moment they replace the drivers with autonomous cars, which they own, they're just a normal transport fleet provider. You can have services. For example, if you take buses, you can automate them as well. Then suddenly you can, the formerly who was driver can check the tickets, can probably sell you some coffee on a bus, and kind of it's more like a flight experience. Just a comment, planes are nearly fully autonomous. Kind of how to deal with these technologies. I'll come to some more examples later. Actually, business models was there. Kind of vehicle ownership will change, because suddenly transport will be so cheap that we will not need to buy cars anymore, nor even make driving licenses. Productivity improvement. So in the morning, if we commute to work, we could probably, instead of driving, we could probably work in the morning, which means perhaps we can count the commuting time to work as our working time as well, which means more free time for us. And yes, I said, improved energy improvement. So those are other reasons why people are so interested in autonomous cars, because they touch upon lots of dimensions of our society. And even go further. So for example, imagine those cars fully autonomous with a desk in the middle, which can even replace your hot desk or even your office as a company. So I know lots of companies where their workers spend most of the time at the clients, where they still need from time to time a desk. So imagine the team gets collected from their houses by this thing, sit together, work together, already decide what to do, which is then their office, drops them off, and then collects another team. Which means suddenly transport fleet operators are not only competing with other transport fleet operators, but with housing estates, with office space. As an example. So you see, it goes into other dimensions, and I think we're at a state we don't even understand yet all the dimensions of our lives it will affect. And even because there will be some talks on robot technology later on, these are just autonomous cars. We haven't actually spoken of technologies which are even replacing what we are doing ourselves. Because why wouldn't you combine autonomous cars with technologies like that? Now, I've just shown you. You still might be saying, okay, I still don't want to have an autonomous cars, and it will probably no one will use them, and so on. Why should we do it? It's kind of, we are used, and I fully agree with that. We are used to systems we have lived in for ages. We are used to drive the cars. We are used to have it as a status symbol. We are used to the fun, let's say, of driving, apart from the traffic jams. Why, who would like to have them? Where's the market for that? Okay, I acknowledge that industry and that academia and then policymakers, they're really interested in that because of the obvious reasons I've given to you. But who actually wants to have them? And there you have to look at the very, very young ones and at the very old ones. Because those are the ones who currently don't have the access to individual mobility, to kind of do something which can get them to A to B, or even that collects them. And there, for example, think of elderly people, perhaps even having dementia, where the thing has to come to them and to collect them. Or of kids, instead of the parents getting you from A to B, that they can use those cars. And that's the statistics from the US, again, which just shows you that on the top, 49 millions, on the bottom 47 millions, of about 300 millions, so 1/3. 1/3 means a massive market which can be then used as an incentive for those technologies. And this is just, a completely untapped market. And then again for us, imagine if you already have used Uber services or taxi services, they will become much, much cheaper if they don't have any driver anymore, which means we'll probably use them much more often. Which then kind of is a question, how are they competing with public transport systems in certain places? But yeah, so if based upon everything what I've shown you, if I would have to answer the question, is society ready for self-driving cars? I would say we will see, because I don't want to make any recommendations and so on. And yeah, we'll see in the next years how it will be spread out, who will be taking leadership in that, and how will people perceive the technology. Okay, thank you.
Спасибо, друзья. Спасибо. Есть вопросы уже, я вижу. Да, у нас есть время на нескольких вопросов. Вот молодой человек поднял первым. Ну вот, собственно, будет девушка вам приносить микрофоны. Ну.
Hello. How many countries already allows to have self-driving cars on the road? This is a small first question. And the second question, what is the difference between Google's self-driving car and Tesla's driving car from policy point of view? So the first one is, as I understand, fully autonomous, and the second one is just a separate, provides a separate mode. Thanks.
The second one, between Tesla and Google, yeah? Okay, I start with the first one. So governments, so I think there's a race going on between the technologies because they see they're interested in being the technology leader in those different technologies, to develop them, to offer those cars, to offer that technology. So that's why governments and regulators are pushing very, very hard to create the right regulatory framework to allow this technology. So there had been a Vienna Convention which said you have always to have a driver in a car. That got changed now, that you don't need to have this strict rule. Certain places like Arizona, like California, in the UK, in Germany, allow in certain places to trial, to test in real life those fleets, which can be cars for passengers, but also goods vehicles, lorries. So there's another world I haven't even mentioned yet, which is also very interesting. So that's the answer. So yeah, it is happening already in terms of regulation. I think it's in terms of insurance and some liability, there need to be still some discussions. The question between Tesla and Google, because at the end you added from a policy point of view. First I'll answer it from a technology point of view because it's quite interesting. So Google's vehicles are very heavily reliant on mapping services. So based upon Google Maps and so on, because they have it. While Tesla vehicles are very heavily reliant on technologies which are kind of looking what's happening around them. Obviously the optimum technology is that brings all those two worlds together. So far as I know, because policymakers don't know the technology yet, they don't care.
Как и везде, впрочем, да. Вот молодой человек в красной футболке был следующим. Если что, можете задавать вопрос на русском, Кристофу переведут.
Thank you for your speech. What do you think about the transitional period where traditional drivers still exist and modern cars and drivers appears? And the second question about okay, just this one.
Okay, thank you. I think it will be a very, very exciting time because we have one world where we have no autonomous cars. We have people are used to, when you're driving around, even when you go to certain crossings, you look at the person, sometimes to the eye, who will drive first. It's even a law in the US. You have lots of eye communication, kind of based upon values, how we kind of show different things to other people, how we behave, and then you can interpret this stuff. If you have suddenly in a system only, let's say, few autonomous cars, suddenly you have things that don't behave in the way you're used to. So yeah, so that might create some challenges, and obviously will create some challenges. And car manufacturers are really, really scared of that, because they are scared of bad publicity. Imagine the first car driving over a person, what some newspapers will be writing about and completely probably killing it off. The other side is, imagine a world where you have nearly only, let's say, autonomous cars, but you are someone who still wants to drive around in a car that you are controlling. You would be probably seen as an intruder to lots of efficiency, because that system will probably work like a clock works, hopefully. And you will be something which is unpredictable for the very well-programmed system. Now, the transition between this thing, I think no one knows how this will happen. So whether you will have cities where you say, okay, now we say new city, only autonomous cars here, or that you start with certain zones, and so on. So that's the reason, I think, why they trial many of those cars. They want to adapt them, that they actually behave in the system of normal drivers, so the human drivers, in a way that they're familiar. Perhaps even they mark those cars that people see, okay, this is a car that might not behave in the normal way. Plus learning. So AI plays a very crucial role in this case.
Молодой человек в первом ряду был. Следующий.
Hello. Thanks for lecture. I have two small questions. First, what type of controlling you'd prefer, centralized or distributed? When we have a centralized system, we can try to avoid some terrorist threats and so on. And we can use our transport system in more effective way. We can see transport situation and so on. And the second question is, do you have any experience in researches of unimodal transport systems? So we don't have any types of transport. We have some unimodal transport system. Do you have some experience?
Can you specify unimodal? What do you mean?
Unimodal. We don't have buses. We don't have cars. We have something average that is good for everything. Do you have some experience?
I'll answer the second one first. No, I don't have experience with that. Because every city is different in the world, I could imagine it would be difficult to create something like that. Plus, most of the cities have a history, so it has somehow through history evolved in an evolutionary way. So we are stuck. I wouldn't say it's bad. We are coming from a certain past. It could. Do I know? So even newly planned cities, which are on the green field, they also have always a mix of transport things, because you want each transport mode has some advantage and some disadvantage, and you want to have a mix for purpose. Kind of, you want to have several alternatives depending on do you need to transport many people from A to B, or only a small bunch. What was the first question again?
Distributed or?
Okay, it will be a mixture, in my opinion, because imagine you are one of the guys stepping in on the road. Do you want the car to ask the central system whether to stop, or do you want the car to decide?
Следующий вопрос, девушка в заднем ряду.
Thank you very much for your lecture. And just we're talking about tech and techniques and technologies, of course, but I want to ask about people. What happen to people in the future? For example, you know about sharing economy. It's BlaBlaCar, of course, and Uber, and IT area, of course, you know. And we can get everything. Just you need to push the button, and people will get everything. But maybe people will be more productive or more smart in the future. Maybe people will be more stupid in the future because we use some like high techniques or technologies in this case. What do you think about this?
So I answer two things. First of all, it started off so Uber and so on, and so BlaBlaCar and Zipcar. Yeah, I agree. Those are all sharing economy cars, because it is actually, yeah, although it's still governed in a very traditional way, you are actually sharing something. Well, Uber is not, so by the experts and so on, they don't like Uber even to call it sharing economy, because it's actually, they want to get rid of the drivers, so it will be a normal. They will own the car, it will not be sharing economy and so on, but for them it's a really, really nice branding. In terms of us becoming stupid, yeah, completely. So for example, myself, I remember when I was going 10 years ago hiking, I was having a map, and it was really, really fun. Or even when I was driving a car somewhere, I had a paper map. I even checked beforehand to do the trip, which kind of helped. Now when I have the GPS on, the moment I lose connection, I'm lost. Or even like, okay, what do I do now? So yeah, we are becoming more and more heavily reliant on technology. And although we are all complaining about that, we are taking part in it, we are still doing it, we are using it all because it is more convenient for us. So it's, in the end, it's about our choices.
Thank you.
Хорошо, вопрос, вот, второй ряд, третий.
You said that the average American car stays 96% of time. And when we will have shared autonomous cars, they will stay for maybe 40% of time. So we will probably need 15 times less cars. So what do car producers think about this?
So that's actually a really, really good question. And they have now accepted it, say like this. So I did actually a study on the German car industry for my PhD to understand how did they make their choices over the last 20 years in terms of how to become more innovative, to provide clean technology and so on. And I'll use as an example Mercedes, which was about 20 years ago. Someone called Hayek from Smart approached them, said, hey, let's do a smart car, which should be a sharing car, and which should be a product where you have a fleet and people, he painted this picture already to them. They took it up because they thought, oh great, we have a small car which can then, with which we can reach emission limits. Plus, why should we do that? Because then we sell less cars. So they completely did the opposite. They started producing them, selling them, even instead of, because he wanted to have less cars, even building so many cars that they could put them really beautiful towers. So next to each smart sales house, there were towers of more smarts than you actually needed. So yes, they didn't like it. But because of more or less people are doing driving licenses, there are alternatives like Zipcar and so on. They've realized they need to do it. So you see that Mercedes has Car2Go, Drive Now by BMW, and I think Chrysler, Fiat, they recently bought another car sharing company, an autonomous car company. They have now accepted it, and it's something where not even the car industry is experiencing, that there's a move away from producing something and then, yeah, I don't care about it anymore. So kind of from a product delivery, companies are becoming now service providers, which is the same with, for example, energy grids. So lots of companies, big energy producers in Germany, I won't say in France, actually in France, in Germany, in France, and the UK, they're less and less interested in generating electricity, but actually more in keeping electricity flowing in the services around smart metering and, because they realize just selling stuff one-off is not creating money. Or even companies for washing machines and which are delivering for B2B, business to business. They don't sell you the washing machine anymore, but actually just place a washing machine there, which you then don't own, but you're using it, you pay then for every use, but you always know it will be working, it will be well maintained and so on. So yeah, which then again changes the type of business and creates other jobs. So yeah, engineers will probably, and people will be, you'll have less salesmen of cars, but more people who will deal with the customer, who will look what is needed and so on. It will change lots of parts of the economy, in many parts, in many domains.
Во втором ряду молодой человек вот здесь.
Hello.
Hello.
There's a big problem that's called the traffic jam. So all we need is to, for my opinion, is to clean the ground from the vehicles. So have you ever thought about creating flying cars? Thank you.
Yes, from my childhood, I always, since I watched Jetsons, I thought, oh my God, I would love to have one of those cars, obviously. Before we go there, let's try to put more people into one car. Instead of having 1 person per car, have 4 persons per car. So that helps already to get rid of some of them. The other way is, even before you have to use the car, how to get rid of the demand of transport. So how do you plan cities in a way that you put things nearer to each other? That eliminates transport as well. If you still need transport, then put it on modal change, which means buses, underground, trains, and so on. And then, yeah, if you still need individual transport, use cars. Now, the flying vehicle thing. Funnily enough, the institutions, so I showed Climate Kick. They are having a company, because now electronics, the batteries are becoming lighter, smaller, cheaper. You have lots of small electric motors. So they actually have now a little box where 2 persons can sit with about 18 rotors and a thing which can fly for about, I think, something between 45 minutes and 1 hour, which is kind of one move towards having, so it's like a drone, but which has some people in it. Yeah, and then we'll see. So I think we might get there. But then the question is, just to throw into the room, some people are already not trusting self-driving cars. Will we trust self-driving flying things? But yeah.
We will.
We will see.
Yeah, we will see.
Thank you.
Все. Друзья, в общем, 2 последних вопроса, и потом уходим на перерыв.
Я надеюсь, это не будет моветоном. Для того, чтобы побыстрее, так сказать, разобраться с вопросами, я буду говорить по-русски. У меня 2 небольших вопроса. Первый вопрос – это вопрос безопасности. Насколько безопасны эти автомобили с точки зрения взлома? Потому что я никогда не поверю, что система бывает абсолютно надежна и безопасна. Всегда можно сделать сценарий использования такой, чтобы убрать неугодных людей, если уж говорить такими словами. Это первый вопрос. И второй вопрос. У вас была замечательная лекция, но один момент там, к сожалению, не был затронут. Вы упомянули, что автомобиль простаивает 96% времени, но вы не упомянули про сценарий использования. Если все люди утром ездят на работу, а вечером с работы, то, учитывая то, что сократим количество автомобилей, все равно будет очень не хватать. Вот как вот с этим проводились какие-то... повторите. Я могу повторить еще раз.
Коротко.
Еще раз сначала.
Wait a moment, they just repeat the question for me.
Okay, no problem.
You can just wait. I just get the question in a moment.
Sure.
Okay, sorry, you have to repeat the question.
Хорошо. 2 вопроса, постараюсь как можно короче. Первый вопрос. У вас в презентации указано, что 96% времени автомобиль простаивает, но не указан сценарий использования. Если каждый день утром весь город ездит на работу, а вечером с работы, то автомобилей на всех хватать не будет. Что с этим делать? Люди просто не пересядут. Мне проще по-английски уже сказать. И еще второй вопрос. И еще один маленький вопрос.
You already have now incentives for people to go at different times to work, which is already happening, and it helped in certain places where they say, okay, come 1 hour later, 1 hour earlier, which doesn't even need autonomous cars to do that. If you then do the autonomous car thing, you can better use capacities because you know where you have free streets. You can probably drive faster. You have less stop and go stuff. You probably, if you make the services right, you can actually bring and drop off people. If you combine, let's say, public transport and autonomous cars, drop them off at the right train station and then collect them again. That you literally just don't have to carry, you just walk and so on. So I think there will be an overall improvement in efficiency. Beyond that, let's say even in the future where we don't have autonomous cars, yes, incentives of incentivizing companies to start at different times, or even telling them, hey, you don't have to be all in the city center. Can you build a cluster there around the city? So the city planning can help around that. So I would say, yes, only autonomous cars will not solve the problem. If everyone still wants to be at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. at the same place, it will make it a bit more efficient, which still helps. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it at all.
И второй вопросик небольшой по поводу все-таки безопасности автомобилей, потому что они никогда не бывают абсолютно безопасны. И примеров масса, начиная от АЭС в Бушере, которую взламывали, и заканчивая другими неприятными случаями. Как вот все-таки быть с такими неприятностями? Может быть, у вас в правительстве какие-то были дискуссии на эту тему, или, допустим, у вас в учебном заведении? Вот что вы можете по этому поводу рассказать?
Of autonomous cars.
Да, да. Yes.
Okay. So I just recently, actually 2 months ago, it's a quite funny one. I found, so in the US, any autonomous car trial has to be published to one agency. I don't remember the name anymore of that. So they send them every few weeks a list of how many incidents did they have in those tests. And first of all, I then realized how many companies actually, because it's an open field, how many companies actually are doing trials. Many more than I thought, even some German, like Bosch, like companies which are just suppliers of technology. And yeah, they list those incidents, which meant, okay, the driver had to interfere with the driving. In terms of real accidents, so all the accidents that happens, as far as I know, you've heard of them in media. Like, for example, the one Tesla car, I think it was a Tesla or Google car, which hit a bus. And then they had to introduce some new technology. Yeah, in general, you say technology is never 100% secure. Yes, I agree with that. But I think in this case, technology will be more secure than the human being. Because we get tired, we get distracted, and so on.
У меня не совсем тот вопросик был, конечно, но ладно. Спасибо.
Друзья, к сожалению, у нас закончилось время, вот, поэтому большое спасибо, Кристофу, за лекцию, большое спасибо, что пришли. Мы все еще остаемся здесь.